Okay, so The Rising had on Whitley Yates, who is a GOP strategist that came heavy with the propaganda about the 2020 election and Trump that unfortunately it seems the hosts were unable to properly counter. So I wanted to take a look at a few of these clips and put into context the horrendously bad nature of her arguments.
I think it's the will of the people and those elected in that position to get you there, absolutely.
Do you think he cares about the will of the people?
I do think he cares about the will of the people.
Why did he dispute the election for
because he felt like there were inconsistencies and irregularities with the election, as well as in different states changing the rules at the last minute to benefit ballot harvesting and things of that nature.
He was lying mostly, wasn't he?
When we talk about election deniers, it's so interesting that we always mention Trump, but we don't mention Hilary and we don't mention Stacey Abrams. And we don't have the exact same reputation or, I mean, honestly, the same critiques when they challenged the elections as well. Did you have that same feeling when Stacey Abrams said that Kemp stole the election from her?
Did she inflame a crowd to go to the Georgia Capitol and try to frustrate the election results?
Answering the question without answering the initial question is not the answer, sir.
Okay, I want to start off by responding to where she says that he didn't answer her question by pointing out when he asked her if Trump's response was mostly lies, she instantly didn't answer his question and jumped to pointing fingers at Hilary and Stacey Abrams. So she did the exact same thing by her own logic. That's not the answer, which it's not. But also, let's talk about the differences here and why there might have been difference in response. Hilary first, because the explanation is really quick and cut and dry. Hilary conceded instantly. She did so privately and publicly and took absolutely zero steps to reverse the outcome of the election. What she referred to, after conceding, by the way, is the very real fact that Russia interfered in the 2016 election on Trump's behalf. This was not only confirmed in the Mueller report that MAGA loves to say exonerated Trump because they've never actually read it. They just get their information directly from Trump, when in reality it found massive amount of interference, leading to 37 indictments, and over 1,000 prosecutors said that if the obstruction acts that Trump committed were committed by a non-president, they would have definitely been indicted, as he repeatedly lied about his contact with Russians, his campaign's contact with Russians, he refused to answer questions and more. But also there was a 1,000-page report that was released by Senate Republicans that extensively detailed the multitude of ways that Russia interfered to try and help Trump. And while Hilary did talk about this publicly, she still never once tried to reverse the election results, never once questioned the integrity of our institutions, never once claimed that she won or refused to concede. So pretty big difference there. With Stacey Abrams, it's first important to put into context that she lost by less than 1.5%, around 55,000 votes. That's a far stretch from 7 million votes. And if you watch her speeches that aren't clipped out of context, she is stating that the election was stolen from the people, not from herself, and it was done so through voter suppression, which I'll leave a multitude of the ways on the screen here. Her opponent, who was the Secretary of State at the time, placed voter registrations on a limbo. This affected tens of thousands of updated eligible voter lists, affecting again, I think 100,000 voters, and over 200 different polling places with the voting machines and such were down. The lines were long, and they were just not working in places of poor and minority neighborhoods, the demographic that more likely would have voted for Stacey Abrams. It's also important to note that the lawsuits that were filed on her behalf, not a single one would have changed or even challenged the outcome of the election, rather put forth to show the issues that happened and to fix them. And voter disenfranchisement has long been an important issue. It is something we should address. The problem is when you conflate that to be large enough to overturn an election, especially a federal election, especially one that you lost by such big margins of 7 million votes. In Hillary's case, it's a complete nothing burger comparison, not at all even in the same boat. For Stacey, I mean, sure, some of her rhetoric was dangerous in the same way that all of Trump's has been, but the more context you learn, the less merit you realize that comparison really has as well, as Trump was claiming a fraudulent outcome, a massive scheme concocted to get him out of the White House, questioned the credibility of all of our institutions, saying they were all against him, and then in the measures he took afterwards is really what differentiates him here, utilizing fake electors that his team even called as such to try and confuse Mike Pence and then pressure him into unilaterally throwing the election back to the House, where Trump had the majority to then stay in power, thwarting our democracy, pressuring state officials to find him votes that clearly were not there, then going on to challenge the outcome of this election in over 60 court cases, losing on merit or evidentiary grounds. The ones he didn't lose on evidentiary grounds, they still looked into the evidence and found no evidence or no merit. And instead of accepting those verdicts or those results, he called those institutions corrupt as well, and still to this day is walking around saying that he won the election. This is just a horrendously disingenuous attempt to justify Trump's inexcusable actions and rhetoric. And it also just boils down to whataboutism, because let's grant that they're all the same, right? Let's grant that all three of these examples are the same. Is her point even to say that all three were wrong, or is it to just point fingers like little bro who got caught stealing, saying that big bro stole too? Because if you want to say in that case that, well, all three were wrong, so none of them deserve to run for office because they're all election deniers and they all tried to thwart our democracy and blah, blah, blah. Sure, let's do that. But most people make this comparison to say, see, the Democrats did bad things. Oh, but Trump, no. Trump's fine. He's good.
He's like stated, the thing about Project 2025 is it doesn't actually have his stamp on it. Now, my argument would be he has said himself, particularly in a Time interview that became pretty infamous pretty fast, that he would leave the door open to firing prosecutors who didn't prosecute people at his behest, putting illegal immigrants in detention camps, using the military to deport people. These are things that he himself has said. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think, to be quite honest, when it comes to any organization or institution really telling Trump what to do, we've seen how he's bucked at that. He is someone who is a free thinker and someone who's going to do what he believes is best. If some of those things are in alignment with where he feels like he wants to lead the nation, then there happens to be alignment there. But I mean, as we saw when he was president, nobody was telling him what to do.
First off, again, there was no answer to the actual question, to what she thinks of Trump being willing to fire prosecutors who didn't do his bidding. He, in his last administration, passed a Schedule F executive order that allowed him to fire government officials that the president usually doesn't have the power to do so. That meaning that he could fire the government employees who don't do his bidding, just like the prosecutors. So that's something you can expect to come back as well. No answer to using the military against immigrants, just jumping to a completely new topic of trying to paint Trump as a free thinker, which is probably the best light she thought she could paint this in, which, by the way, did more danger and harm than it did good. For instance, his advisors told him not to bomb General Soleimani in Iran, right? And he refused to listen to them, and it led to 3 U.S. soldiers dying and dozens being critically injured and dozens of retaliatory attacks. It led to him pulling out of a multitude of diplomatic relations, weakening our position abroad. You can see how foreign leaders had a lower opinion of him than they do of Biden. His advisors told him something needed to be done about Russia invading Crimea in 2014, and he did nothing as Putin was swearing he wouldn't invade Ukraine, and now he's went on and invaded Ukraine as well, likely because there was no response to him invading Crimea. So as far as pretending Trump's free thinking attitude is a plus, it's absolutely been nothing but a detriment that we were lucky to survive the first 4 years of.